Applying the verdict of obedience on the disobedient wife. The storyline of Firdaus is one of the most striking examples of how the verdict of obedience is enforced in the novel. What the verdict of obedience means. In Islamic family law, a husband can file a verdict of obedience case against his wife if she refuses to live with him or obey his marital authority. The court then issues a verdict of obedience, legally compelling the wife to return to her husband's house. If she resists, she risks losing her financial rights, like maintenance, faces social stigma and legal action by the police. Firdaus's experience. Forced return. Firdaus is ordered by the court to return to her husband despite her objections. The ruling strips her of agency, treating her as property rather than a partner. Loss of autonomy. She cannot legally refuse without severe consequences. Her resistance is framed as disobedience rather than self-protection. Legal and social pressure. Police and community reinforce the verdict, shaming her for defying tradition and religion. Psychological toll. The rule reduces her identity to obedience, erasing her desires and silencing her voice. Thematic significance. Her case illustrates how patriarchal law weaponizes religion to control women's bodies and choices. Her struggle embodies the novel's critique. Obedience is not about faith, but about submission to male authority. By showing her suffering, the narrative exposes the violence of legal systems that claim moral legitimacy while perpetuating injustice. Contrast of her coerced obedience with Inhisar's resistance. That comparison highlights how the novel stages different responses to patriarchal control, one coerced, one defiant. Firdaus and Intisar embody two opposite responses to patriarchal control, and the novel uses their arcs to dramatize the stakes of obedience versus resistance. Firdaus. Coerced obedience. Legal constraint. The court issues a verdict of obedience, forcing her back into her husband's household against her will. Loss of agency. Her refusal is criminalized. She is treated as disobedient property rather than a partner. Social pressure. Family and community shame her, reinforcing the patriarchal narrative that obedience equals virtue. Psychological impact. Her identity is reduced to compliance, silencing her desires and erasing her autonomy. Symbolism. Firdaus represents the tragic cost of submission, how law and custom collude to crush women's freedom. Intisar. Defiant resistance. Personal rebellion. Intisar refuses to accept patriarchal dictates, insisting on her right to love freely. Risk-taking. Her resistance exposes her to punishment, imprisonment, and social ostracism, yet she persists. Voice and agency. Unlike Firdaus, she asserts her will, challenging both legal and religious authorities. Transformative symbol. Intisar embodies resilience and defiance, showing that resistance, though costly, preserves dignity and selfhood. Narrative role. She dramatizes the possibility of breaking free, even when the system is stacked against her. Comparative framework. Character. Response to patriarchal control. Consequences. Symbolic role. Firdaus. Coerced obedience via court verdict. Loss of autonomy. Forced return, silenced identity. Tragic emblem of submission. Intisar. Defiant resistance against law and family. Punishment, imprisonment, social ostracism. Heroic emblem of resilience. Thematic contrast. Firdaus shows how patriarchy enforces obedience through law and shame, stripping women of choice. Intisar shows how resistance, even when punished, asserts humanity and dignity. Together, they stage a dialectic of control versus defiance, illustrating the novel's central critique: obedience is demanded, but resistance is transformative. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, the policemen are depicted as the enforcers of the Sharia court's verdict of obedience against the so-called disobedient wife, Firdaus. Their role is not neutral law-keeping, but the physical execution of patriarchal authority. How the policemen carry out the verdict. Arrest in Gedaref. They storm Firdaus's home, announcing that she is guilty of disobedience to her husband Osman al-Taib. She is treated like a criminal, seized by force, and denied any chance to defend herself. Physical coercion. Inside the police car, they slap and restrain her when she protests, turning the vehicle into a moving prison. Violence and humiliation are used to silence her resistance and weaken her spirit. Forced transfer to Khartoum. Instead of being jailed independently, Firdaus is transported across Sudan and delivered directly to Osman, as if she were his property. The policemen act as agents of patriarchal law, ensuring she is returned to her husband's control. Symbolic enforcement. Their actions dramatize the Sharia court's ruling: a wife must obey her husband, and disobedience is punishable by force. The police embody the collusion between state power and patriarchal authority, showing how women's autonomy is criminalized. Thematic significance. State plus patriarchy equals control. The verdict is carried out not just by Osman but by the machinery of the state, proving that patriarchal oppression is institutionalized. Dehumanization of women. Firdaus is treated as an object to be delivered, not a person with rights. Resistance versus obedience. Her protests during arrest and transfer highlight the novel's central theme: women resist even when the system conspires to break them. In short, the policemen carry out the Sharia court's verdict of obedience by arresting Firdaus, brutalizing her during transport, and delivering her back to Osman in Khartoum. A chilling dramatization of how patriarchal law is enforced through state violence. Here's a visceral, dialogue-driven vignette of the enforcement of the Sharia court's verdict of obedience, showing the policeman barking orders, Firdaus's protests, and Osman's smug reception in Khartoum. Vignette: Enforcement of obedience. Scene 1. Arrest in Gadaref. The door splintered under the policeman's fists. 5 uniformed men stormed into Firdaus's home, their voices sharp, their boots heavy. Policeman 1, barking, Firdaus Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. By order of the Sharia court, you are guilty of disobedience. Stand up. Firdaus, shouting, trembling with fury, disobedience? My only crime is refusing to be a slave. You cannot deliver me like property. Policeman 2, snapping, silence. You will answer to your husband in his house of obedience. Move. They seized her arms, dragging her toward the waiting police car. Her cries echoed through the narrow street, neighbors watching in silence. Scene 2, inside the police car. The vehicle roared down the cracked highway, dust choking the air. Firdaus struggled against her shackles, her voice rising above the engine. Firdaus, defiant, breathless, you can bind my body, but you will never bind my spirit. Policeman 3, slapping her, snarling, quiet woman. You will arrive broken. Obedience is your fate. Her cheek burned, her body twisted against the seat, but her eyes blazed with unyielding rage. The car rattled on, a moving prison carrying her toward Khartoum. Scene 3, Arrival in Khartoum. The hotel courtyard glowed under the harsh city lights. Mr. Osman Al-Taib stood waiting, lips scarred, eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. The policeman shoved Firdaus forward, her wrists bound, her body frail but her gaze unbroken. Policeman 4, formal, to Osman, she is yours now. The verdict of obedience has been enforced. Mr. Osman stepped closer, savoring the moment, his voice dripping with triumph. Osman, smirking, triumphant, my runaway bride returns. Even the state obeys me. Welcome my bride, Firdaus. Firdaus, spitting her words, defiant, you may cage me here, but you will never cage my soul. The policemen turned away, their duty complete. Osman's grin widened as Firdaus glared at him, her body bound but her spirit unbroken. The oppressive silence of Khartoum swallowed the scene, heavy with injustice. Intisar's attempt to stop the policemen from arresting her sister Firdaus in their house at Al-Gadaref city is portrayed as an act of desperate courage against overwhelming force. How Intisar tries to stop the arrest. Physical intervention. Intisar throws herself between Firdaus and the policemen, trying to shield her sister with her own body. She clings to Firdaus's arms, refusing to let them drag her away. Verbal protest. She shouts at the officers, accusing them of injustice, She has committed no crime. You cannot take her like a thief in the night. Appeal to law and morality. Intisar pleads that Firdas is innocent, that disobedience is not a crime, and that the arrest is nothing but cruelty disguised as law. Emotional resistance. Her cries are filled with anguish, invoking family bonds and humanity. She is my sister. You cannot tear her from us. Why Intisar fails. Overwhelming force. The policemen are 5 strong, armed, and determined. Her protests are drowned out by their commands. Patriarchal authority. The officers act under Osman's complaint and the Sharia court's verdict. Intisar's appeals to justice carry no weight in a system designed to silence women. Symbolic defeat. Her resistance highlights the futility of individual protest against institutionalized oppression. She embodies the courage of solidarity, but the machinery of patriarchy crushes her effort. Thematic significance. Intisar's intervention dramatizes sisterhood and solidarity, women standing together against injustice. Her failure underscores the brutality of patriarchal law, where even family bonds cannot protect a woman from being treated as property. The scene becomes a metaphor for how resistance is punished, but also how courage persists even in defeat. Here's a visceral, dialogue-driven vignette of the arrest attempt, capturing Intisar's cries, the policeman's commands, and Furdas's desperate struggle in real time. Vignette: the arrest in Gedaref. The pounding on the door shook the small house. Intisar rushed forward, her heart hammering, as 5 policemen forced their way inside. Their boots thudded against the floor, their voices sharp and commanding. Policeman 1, barking, Firdas Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. By order of the Sharia court, you are guilty of disobedience. Come with us. Firdas stood frozen, her fists clenched, her eyes blazing with defiance. Intisar threw herself between them, arms outstretched. Intisar, crying out, no. She has committed no crime. You cannot take my sister like a thief in the night. Policeman 2, snapping, stand aside, girl. This is the law. She belongs to her husband. Firdas struggled as 2 policemen grabbed her arms, dragging her toward the door. Her voice rose, raw and furious. Firdas, screaming, I am not his property. You will not deliver me like cattle. Intisar clung to her sister's waist, sobbing, her voice breaking with desperation. Intisar, pleading, she is my blood. You cannot tear her from us. Please, have mercy. The policeman yanked harder, one striking Intisar's shoulder to force her back. Firdas thrashed against their grip, her cries echoing through the house. Policeman 3, growling, enough. The verdict of obedience must be enforced. She goes to her husband's house. Intisar collapsed to the floor, reaching out as Firdas was dragged away, her fingers clawing at empty air. Furdas's voice rang out one last time, fierce and unbroken. Firdas, defiant, breathless, you may take me, but you will never break me. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving Intisar's sobs to fill the silence of the house, the clash of resistance and authority still reverberating in the air. This vignette captures the raw collision of forces, policemen barking orders, Furdas's desperate struggle, and Intisar's anguished cries, turning the arrest into a visceral moment of resistance crushed by state power. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, when Frida, Sulla, and Sami learn that Firdas has already been arrested by 5 policemen in Gedaref and delivered to the House of Obedience of her husband Osman al-Taib, each reacts with a mix of shock, grief, and outrage, yet their responses reveal different facets of solidarity and despair. Frida's reaction. Emotional collapse. Frida bursts into tears, horrified that Firdas has been dragged away like a criminal. Voice of compassion. She laments the cruelty of the system, crying out that no woman deserves to be treated this way. Symbolic role. Frida embodies the emotional toll of patriarchal violence on women. Her grief is a mirror of the collective suffering of sisters and friends who witness injustice, but feel powerless to stop it. Sulla's reaction. Personal devastation. Sulla, who loves Firdas, is crushed. His voice trembles with anguish, his fists clenched in helpless rage. Anger and protest. Being a lawyer, reacts with fury, denouncing the policeman and the Sharia court's verdict. Political awareness. He rails against the collusion of state and patriarchy, pointing out that the police are not protecting justice, but enforcing male dominance. Symbolic role. Sulla represents the intellectual and activist voice. He sees his beloved's arrest as part of a larger system of oppression, not just a personal tragedy. Sammy's reaction. Desperate resolve. He vows to fight for Firdas, even if it means confronting his father, Mr. Osman al-Taib, or the authorities. His reaction is deeply personal, driven by love and loyalty for his beloved Intisar and her innocent sister Firdas. Symbolic role. Sammy embodies the intimate cost of patriarchal cruelty, the way it destroys love, hope, and human connection. Thematic significance. Together, Frida, Sulla, and Sammy's reactions dramatize the collective impact of Firdas' arrest, grief, outrage, and determination. Their responses highlight the novel's central theme. Resistance against patriarchal law is not just an individual struggle, it reverberates through families, friendships, and communities. The House of Obedience becomes a symbol of how women are delivered into captivity, while those who love them are left to rage and mourn outside its walls. Here's a dialogue-driven vignette that dramatizes the moment Frida, Sulla, and Sammy learn Firdas has been arrested and delivered to Osman's House of Obedience. It captures Frida's sobs, Sulla's fiery denunciations, and Sammy's anguished vows in real time. Vignette: News of Firdas' arrest. The room was heavy with silence until the words fell like a hammer. Intisar screams, "Firdas has been taken." 5 policemen dragged her from her house like a criminal. She is already in the House of Obedience. Frida, bursting into sobs, clutching her face, "No, no, it cannot be." They tore her away like a criminal. "My poor Firdas, what cruelty is this? How can they call it justice?" Her cries filled the room, raw and unrestrained, echoing the grief of sisterhood betrayed by law. Sulla, pale, trembling, voice breaking with anguish, "Firdas, my beloved. They have stolen her from me, delivered her into his hands. But I will not stand idle. I swear I will fight for her, even if it means confronting the whole world myself alone. I will tear down the walls of that cursed House of Obedience if I must." His vow was desperate, his fists clenched, his eyes wet with rage and love. Sammy, slamming his fist against the table, voice blazing, "This is not justice, it is tyranny. The Sharia court, the police, my evil father Osman al-Taib, Imam Sheikh Marzouk, they are all complicit. They do not protect the people, they protect men's pride. They have turned obedience into a weapon and women into prisoners." His words rang like fire, each syllable a denunciation of the system that sanctioned Firdas' suffering. Frida, sobbing, reaching for him, "They will crush you too, Sammy and Intisar. The law is against us." Sulla, fierce, resolute, "Then let the law hear our voices. Firdas' arrest is not the end, it is the spark. We must resist together." The 3 stood in the dim light, grief, fury, and resolve colliding in the air. Firdas' absence was a wound, but their voices, sobs, denunciations, vows, wove together into a chorus of resistance against the silence imposed by obedience. This vignette captures the clash of emotions, Frida's grief, Sulla's fiery outrage, and Sammy's anguished determination, dramatizing how Firdas' arrest reverberates through those who love her. Excerpts about Firdas while she is in the police car. When Frida, Sulla, and Sammy learned that 5 armed policemen had arrested and taken Firdas to her alleged husband, they dispersed in different directions looking for her. Unfortunately, none of them correctly guessed her whereabouts. By then, the legally arrested disobedient wife is 2 hours away from the city of Gedaref. Firdas, who is tied by handcuffs, sits between 2 policemen, and 2 other policemen sit in front of her. Even the police van driver is also a law enforcement officer. All 5 police officers are well-trained policemen who are armed to the teeth. They did not put much effort into arresting the so-called disobedient wife and taking her out of her house, except for a few slaps and kicks that they directed at her sister, Intisar, who tried to resist them and obstruct justice. Her old mother Sarah wept and begged them not to take her daughter, but her tears and pleas fell on deaf ears. For some time, the policeman tried to talk to Firdas, but she did not respond, and then they ignored her and started talking to each other. While they were talking among themselves, her mind was thinking of Sulla, Farida, Sammy, and Intisar. The first question that popped into her troubled mind is, what will they do when they learn of her kidnapping? Answering such a question increased her fear. She thought they might run into those evil men's houses and kill them all. She also thought that Farida, Intisar, and Sammy might blame her boyfriend, Sulla, because he told them that the court must send 3 invitation letters before they send the policeman to take the rebellious wife to her husband's house of obedience. His friends believed his words because they thought that he is a recognized Sudanese lawyer who knew the law of his country. But what he expected did not happen, and this may lead to division among the friends. However, she told herself that if everyone doubted Sulla, she would not question his words. She knows he genuinely loves her and will soon come to her rescue. She also remembered the words of her sister Frida. As long as I am alive, the evil old man Osman al-Taib will not touch my sister Firdas. On that basis, she assures herself that her friends will come to her rescue and expose the evil plots that have been plotted against her and her sister Intisar by her criminal brother Omar and other evil conspirators. Excerpts about the violent response of a policeman to the reaction of the disobedient wife. While her mind was thinking those thoughts, she felt the police van suddenly come to a stop. She looked outside. She saw a soldier approaching them with a large rifle in his hands. Firdas understand that they have reached the town of Alfeo. When the soldier reached them, one of the 5 policemen took out his identity card and told him that I am the police inspector, Hussein Hassan Hassanain, from the Gadaref police. We are 5 policemen on a mission to Khartoum. Who is that young woman in your car? The soldier asked. She is a rebellious wife who ran away from her legal husband. We have to deliver her to her husband, who is staying at the Hilton International Hotel. Do you have official papers for your assignment? Yes, of course. We have an official order from the Sharia court. Then the police inspector Hussein took out the verdict of obedience order and handed it over to him. The soldier read the official order and was satisfied and said, "Please proceed." When Firdas learns that they are going to take her to the Hilton Hotel to the evil old man, she starts to panic. Then she imagined herself locked in one room with him. She decided not to allow him to come within 10 steps of her. If he tries to approach her, she will spit on him, slap him, scratch his face, and kick him, and if all these blows don't bring him back to his senses, she will kill him. Suddenly her mind switches to her archenemy, Omar. She told herself because of him, she stood before the court for the first time in her life, and she was arrested in her home, handcuffed like a criminal girl, and forcibly taken to a man who might rape her as his slave under the pretext of permissible Islamic marriage. Her train of thoughts was once again interrupted by the sudden stop of the police van. She understood from the policeman that it was lunchtime. "What do you want to eat?" Inspector Hussein asked. Firdas remained silent. Then 4 of them left the carriage and walked towards the food shacks on the highway. They left her with the driver. Half an hour later, they came back and brought 2 sandwiches, one for her and the other for the driver. Inspector Hussein put the sandwich in front of her and asked her to eat. Then he removed his keys and opened the handcuffs. Firdas remained like a statue. "I think the beautiful bride is on hunger strike," said one of the policemen sarcastically. Then he took the sandwich and placed it on her closed lips. The alleged disobedient wife spat food in the policeman's face. In response to her daring act, the policeman slapped her with full force until she turned upside down. She fell backwards until her black underwear and thighs were fully exposed. Then the angry policeman quickly stood up and lifted his leg and was about to kick her in the face with his boot, but Inspector Hussein intercepted him and caught his hands. Inspector Hussein said, "Please stop that, police officer Mahmoud. Do you want us to take her to the old man without her teeth?" Lucky for her, I would have made her kiss my feet without her clothes on her naked body if I were on my own with her. Then I would rape her and strip her virginity in broad daylight before the old man could shove his rusty dick inside her fucking pussy. After that, Inspector Hussein took the hands of the apprehended bride who had been beaten and lifted her from between the two car seats. Then he tied the handcuffs on her hands. A few drops of blood could be seen on her extremely frightened face. Her right cheek was also swollen due to the strong slap. Inside the police car on her way from Gadaref to Khartoum, Firdaus's mental state is portrayed as a storm of fear, rage, and defiance. The cramped vehicle becomes not only a physical prison, but also a crucible for her inner struggle. Mental conditions of Firdaus. Shock and disbelief. She reels from the suddenness of her arrest, struggling to comprehend how her resistance has been criminalized. The sight of 5 armed policemen dragging her away leaves her stunned, her mind racing with disbelief. Humiliation and dehumanization. Being shackled and treated like property gnaws at her dignity. She feels stripped of her humanity, reduced to an object being delivered to Osman. Fear and vulnerability. The slap inside the car, the suffocating silence, and the looming journey to Khartoum fill her with dread. She fears what awaits in the House of Obedience, a place synonymous with captivity and forced submission. Anger and defiance. Despite her fear, her spirit burns with rage. She protests loudly, even when silenced by violence. Her inner voice insists, "You can cage my body, but you will never cage my soul." Isolation and despair. Surrounded by hostile policemen, she feels utterly alone. The landscape rushing past the fields, the Blue Nile River, becomes a cruel reminder of freedom slipping away. Thematic resonance. Firdaus's mental condition inside the police car dramatizes the collision of resistance and oppression. Her fear and humiliation show the crushing weight of patriarchal law, while her defiance reveals the resilience of the human spirit. The journey itself becomes symbolic, a passage from home and family into captivity, from protest into enforced silence. Here's a stream of consciousness vignette that can immerse the reader inside Firdaus's mind as the police car rattles toward Khartoum, carrying her to the House of Obedience. Her thoughts flow in fragments, raw and unfiltered. Vignette. Inside Firdaus's mind. The car jolts, metal groans, dust swirls. My wrists ache. Shackles bite. 5 of them. 5 men. 5 shadows. Their eyes cold, their silence heavier than chains. I am not a criminal. I am not his property. Yet they drag me like a thief in the night. The slap still burns. Cheek on fire, body twisted, upside down. Humiliation tastes bitter, like dust in my mouth. Khartoum. The word itself is a cage. The House of Obedience, walls waiting to swallow me whole. But my spirit claws at the bars. I will not bow. I will not break. The Blue Nile River flashes past silver, fleeting freedom. If only I could leap, dissolve into water, be carried away, washed clean of their verdict. Silence in the car. Engine roars, drowning my cries. But inside, my voice screams louder. You can cage my body. You can starve my flesh. You can slap me until I fall. But you will never cage my soul. The road stretches endlessly. Dust, heat, suffocation. Every mile a wound. Every mile a test. I am Firdaus. I am resistance. Even in chains, I am free. This vignette lets you feel Firdaus's mental state directly, fragmented, raw, oscillating between despair and defiance, as the police car becomes both a physical prison and a stage for her inner resistance. Excerpts and summaries. Excerpt from the Gadaref setting. Here, traditional values dominate, and the lives of women are strictly controlled by family, religious leaders, and societal expectations. This sets the stage for Firdaus's arrest. Her refusal to obey Osman is treated as a violation of these rigid norms. Excerpt on Khartoum and police brutality. It is fraught with new risks for women, including sexual harassment, police brutality, and the threat of being arrested or forced into marriage. Firdaus's arrest in Gadaref and transfer to Khartoum exemplifies this risk. The police act as enforcers of patriarchal law, dragging her from her home and delivering her to Osman. Summary of the arrest and transfer. Firdaus is accused of disobedience under Sharia court rulings. 5 policemen storm her house in Gedaref, seize her by force, and silence her protests. The police car becomes a moving prison, where she is slapped and humiliated to break her spirit. She is transported across Sudan, crossing landscapes like the Blue Nile River, symbolizing freedom slipping away. In Khartoum, she is not treated as an independent offender, but delivered directly to Osman's House of Obedience, reinforcing the idea that she is his property. The scene dramatizes the collusion of state power and patriarchal authority, showing how women's resistance is criminalized and punished. These excerpts and summaries capture the tone of oppression and brutality surrounding her arrest and transfer. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, the arrest of Firdaus in her home in Gedaref city and her forced delivery to her husband Osman al-Taib in Khartoum is a pivotal moment that dramatizes how patriarchal law and state power collude to suppress women's autonomy. Why the policemen arrest Firdaus? Accusation of disobedience. Firdaus is accused of defying her husband's authority, refusing obedience, resisting his control, and attempting to live independently. Under the interpretations of Sharia and patriarchal custom, this is treated as a punishable offense. Legal and religious enforcement. In Sudanese society, as depicted in the novel, the police act as enforcers of patriarchal and religious verdicts. A wife's disobedience is criminalized, and the state intervenes to restore male authority. Osman's influence. Mr. Osman al-Taib leverages his social and legal power to compel the police to act. His wounded pride and desire for control drive him to use the state as his weapon against Firdaus. Why she is delivered to Osman in Khartoum. Restoration of patriarchal order. The police do not imprison Firdaus as an independent offender. Instead, they deliver her back to her husband, reinforcing the idea that a woman is her husband's property. Symbolic transfer of power. By moving her from Gedaref to Khartoum, the narrative shows how women are uprooted and displaced to serve male authority. Firdaus is denied agency over her own body and location. Legalized violence. The act of delivering her to Osman is a form of legalized violence, state institutions colluding with patriarchal figures to ensure obedience through coercion. Thematic significance. This arrest and forced transfer highlight the fusion of state power and patriarchal control. Firdaus's resistance is criminalized, while Osman's cruelty is legitimized. The scene underscores the novel's central critique. Women are punished not for crimes, but for seeking freedom and dignity. So, Firdaus is arrested in Gedaref and delivered to Osman in Khartoum because her defiance is treated as a crime against patriarchal law, and the police act as enforcers of male authority, restoring her to her husband as if she were property rather than a person. Tracing of Firdaus's forced journey by police car from Gedaref city to Khartoum city, written as a vivid, scene-style narrative that captures the geography, atmosphere, and emotional tension. The journey, Gedaref-Khartoum. Departure, Gedaref city. The police car rattles through the dusty streets of Gedaref. Firdaus, shackled in the back seat, presses her forehead against the window bars, watching her neighbors avert their eyes. Policemen sit stiffly in front, their rifles resting across their knees. Firdaus, whispering to herself, "They drag me like a criminal, for daring to live free." On the road, Eastern Sudan. The car speeds along cracked highways, past fields of sorghum and scattered villages. The air is hot, suffocating, dust swirling through the open windows. Firdaus's stomach growls with hunger, her lips parched. Policeman 1, gruffly, "Stay quiet." Khartoum awaits. Firdaus, defiant, "Weak Khartoum is no prison strong enough for my spirit." Crossing the Blue Nile River. The police car thunders across a bridge spanning the river, its waters glinting under the sun. Firdaus stares at the flowing current, imagining escape, freedom carried downstream. Firdaus, to herself, "If only the river could carry me away, away from their chains." Approaching Khartoum, the capital's edge. Hours later, the skyline of Khartoum rises, mosques, hotels, and government buildings shimmering in the haze. The car slows as traffic thickens, horns blaring, the city alive with chaos. Furtis's heart pounds. She knows Osman waits. Policeman 2, mocking, your husband will be pleased. The law has delivered you. Furtis, spitting her words, delivered like property. But I am no man's possession. Arrival, hotel in Khartoum. The car pulls into the hotel courtyard. Osman Al-Taib stands at the entrance, lips scarred, eyes gleaming with smug anticipation. The policemen drag Furtis out, her wrists bound, her body frail but her gaze unbroken. Osman, smirking, my runaway wife returns. Even the state obeys me. Furtis, defiant, breathless, you may cage me here, but you will never cage my soul. This journey dramatizes the oppressive machinery at work. The police car becomes a moving prison, the landscape of Sudan a silent witness, and Khartoum the stage where patriarchal power awaits. Furtis's body is bound, but her spirit remains unyielding. Furtis's forced transfer from Gaddaref to Khartoum covers about 422 kilometers, is almost equal to 5.5 to 6 hours by road, passing through eastern Sudan's arid plains and crossing the Blue Nile River before reaching the capital. Geographic route breakdown. Segment. Distance/duration. Key features. Narrative significance. Departure, Gaddaref City, Al-Gaddaref State. Starting point. Dusty streets, sorghum fields, tightly knit conservative community. Furtis is arrested in her home, dragged into the police car. Road toward Khartoum corridor. 150 km. Dry plains, scattered villages, cracked highways. The police car becomes a moving prison. Furtis watches the countryside blur past. Crossing the Blue Nile River, Wadi Madani City, River Nile State. 327 km from Khartoum. Bridge over the Atbara River, lifeline flowing north into the Nile. Furtis imagines the river as escape, freedom carried downstream. Approach to Khartoum. Final 90 km. Increasing traffic, mosques, hotels, government buildings. The capital looms as the seat of patriarchal power. Osman awaits smugly. Arrival, Khartoum City. Endpoint. Urban chaos, Kober prison nearby, Osman's hotel. Furtis is delivered to her husband, symbolizing the collusion of state and patriarchy. Visualizing the journey. Total distance, 422 kilometers. Estimated duration, 5 hours 38 minutes by car. Major stop, Blue Nile River crossing, a symbolic threshold between eastern Sudan and the capital's authority. Landscape, from Gaddaref's agricultural hardship to the barren plains, then into Khartoum's bustling urban sprawl. Thematic resonance. The geography mirrors Furtis's ordeal. Gaddaref equals confinement in tradition. Blue Nile River equals fleeting vision of freedom. Khartoum equals the machinery of patriarchal law and Osman's dominance. The journey is not just physical, it is a forced passage from resistance to subjugation, with the police car as a symbol of state-sanctioned coercion. The moment when one of the 5 policemen slaps Furtis inside the police car until she is turned upside down is a brutal illustration of how state power enforces patriarchal obedience through violence. Why the policeman slaps Furtis? Punishment for defiance. Furtis refuses to remain silent during her forced transfer from Gaddaref to Khartoum. She protests, shouts, and resists being treated like property. The slap is meant to silence her rebellion. Assertion of authority, the policeman's violence is a demonstration of control, a reminder that she is powerless in the face of the state's machinery. Turning her upside down is both physical humiliation and symbolic subjugation. Collusion with Osman's power. The policemen act not as neutral enforcers of law, but as agents of Osman's will. Their violence ensures she arrives broken and subdued, ready to be delivered to her husband. Symbolic meaning. Dehumanization. By slapping her until she is physically overturned, the policeman reduces Furtis to an object, stripping her of dignity. Silencing resistance. The slap is not just physical, it is meant to silence her voice, her protests, her defiance. State violence against women. The scene dramatizes how patriarchal authority is upheld by the state. Women are punished for disobedience, while men's power is protected. Narrative function. The slap inside the police car transforms the vehicle into a moving prison, a space where Furtus's body is controlled and punished. It underscores the novel's central theme. Women's resistance is criminalized, and their suffering is enforced not only by husbands, but by the state apparatus itself. So, the policeman slaps Furtus until she is turned upside down because her protests threaten the fragile authority of both Osman and the patriarchal system. The act is a violent attempt to silence her spirit and deliver her subdued to Khartoum. Here's a visceral, dialogue-driven reconstruction of the police car scene, designed to immerse you in Furtus's cries, the policeman's brutality, and the suffocating atmosphere inside the vehicle. Police car vignette. The slap. The police car rattled along the cracked highway, dust swirling through the open windows. 5 policemen sat rigid, their rifles glinting in the dim light. Furtus was shackled in the back seat, her body pressed against the cold metal, her voice rising above the hum of the engine. Furtus, crying out, defiant, "You drag me like a criminal. My only crime is refusing to bow. I am not his property." The policemen exchanged glances. One of them, broad-shouldered and stern, turned suddenly, his hand snapping across her face with brutal force. Policeman, snarling, "Silence, woman. You will obey, even in chains." The slap sent her sprawling, her body twisting until she was half upside down against the seat. Her wrists strained against the shackles, her breath ragged. Furtus, screaming, voice breaking, "You can strike me, but you cannot kill my spirit. My voice will not be silenced." The air inside the car grew suffocating. The other policemen stared ahead, unmoved, their silence complicit. The engine roared louder, drowning her cries, but her words lingered like fire in the cramped space. Policeman, growling, pressing her down, "You will arrive in Khartoum broken. Your husband will teach you obedience." Furtus's cheek burned, her body trembling, yet her eyes blazed with unyielding fury. She lay twisted on the seat, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on her, the car itself transformed into a moving prison. This vignette captures the claustrophobic brutality of the police car, Furtus's cries echoing against metal walls, the slap that turns her upside down, and the suffocating silence of men enforcing patriarchal law. Excerpts about the arrival at the hotel in the capital city. When the police van started moving again, the innocent kidnapped girl's mind became very confused. She thought that the policeman would force her to hand over her body to the impudent old man to abuse her. She imagined herself being chained by the 5 policemen until the old man raped her. She started weeping and shedding her hot tears. Silently, she asked herself, how would she live if such evil happened to her? Therefore, she decides to jump out of the hotel and kill herself if the old man rapes her and desecrates her body. She would rather kill herself than let the evil old man steal her virginity. Her mind turned back to her beloved Sulla. Will he come and save her before the old man defiles her body? Her thoughts were interrupted again when she heard Inspector Hussein talking to her. "Oh, young lady, first of all let me apologize to you for what happened between you and Sergeant Mahmoud Hamadan. Secondly, I want you to know that we are not happy that you have been arrested at your residence by us. We are also not happy that the policemen take you by force to your legal husband. We hope that the groom will treat you with great respect and that you will be taken to him as a bride of your own free will for your honeymoon. It seems that your rebellion against your lawful husband prompted the judge of the Sharia court to issue a verdict of obedience against you. Because of your misconduct, you are now taken by the police as a disobedient wife to the house of obedience to your lawful husband, Mr.
Osman Altayeb.
We are just doing our duty as policemen. Once we hand you over as a runaway bride to your groom, our turn is over. Now we are about 20 minutes from the hotel. I'm going to uncuff you because I don't think you would like us to take you inside the hotel in handcuffs, although we have the right to do so. As long as we do our duty, we don't care what people say or do. Therefore, my wise advice to you is to be a submissive girl and a good bride and follow us without resistance into the hotel. If you resist, we will drag you into the hotel, and if need be, we will tie you up again and beat you too." After this mixture of instructions and threats, Inspector Hussein opened the handcuffs of the imprisoned bride. Firdaus remained where she was, as if she had not been spoken to. The text shows that when the police van stopped in front of the Hilton International Hotel at 4:15 p.m., the hotel guard reacted with immediate attention and surprise. He stood up and approached the car, clearly curious and concerned. His astonishment grew when he saw two policemen in khaki uniforms forcibly dragging a beautiful young woman, Firdaus, out of the vehicle. This reaction suggests a mix of duty and shock. He was alert enough to respond quickly, but the scene he witnessed was unexpected and disturbing. The hotel guard thought the police had mistaken the Hilton Hotel for Khobar jail because of the way the officers behaved when they arrived. According to the text, the policemen dragged a young woman, Firdaus, into the hotel in an extremely harsh and degrading manner, pushing her and carrying her as if she were a dangerous criminal. This shocked the guard, who had worked in the five-star Hilton Hotel for years and had never seen a guest treated so inhumanely. The guard angrily shouted, "This is a hotel, not a jail," because the scene resembled a prison transfer rather than a honeymoon check-in. The police justified their actions by claiming they were enforcing a Sharia court order to return a runaway wife to her husband who is staying in a deluxe room in the five-star hotel. Their threats to beat or even kill the guard if he interfered reinforced the impression that they were acting like prison wardens rather than law enforcers in a luxury hotel. In short, the guard's reaction stemmed from the stark contrast between the Hilton status as a prestigious hotel and the brutal, jail-like treatment of the girl by the police. Here's what the novel reveals about the police's justification for their actions. 1. Framing their role as duty. The policemen repeatedly claim they are just doing our duty as policemen by returning Firdaus to her lawful husband. They describe her as a runaway bride and insist that their responsibility ends once she is handed over. This framing positions their violence as part of enforcing marital obedience rather than personal malice. They even warn her, "If you resist, we will drag you into the hotel, and if need be, we will tie you up again and beat you too." This shows they believe coercion is permissible to fulfill their mandate. 2. Assertion of state authority. The slap and physical humiliation are portrayed as a demonstration of control, a reminder that she is powerless against the machinery of the state. Turning her upside down is not only physical but symbolic, reinforcing her subjugation. The act transforms the police car into a moving prison, emphasizing that resistance is criminalized. 3. Collusion with patriarchal power. The policemen act as agents of the Sharia court rather than neutral enforcers. Their violence ensures Firdaus arrives broken and subdued, ready to be delivered to her husband. This collusion underscores how state power is used to uphold patriarchal norms. 4. Silencing resistance. The slap is explicitly intended to silence her protests and defiance. Her cries, "My only crime is refusing to bow. I am not his property," are met with brutality to crush her spirit. The justification here is that her rebellion threatens both her husband's authority and the patriarchal system. 5. Religious and cultural rationalization. The narrative later invokes religious texts and cultural norms, arguing that disciplining disobedient women is a divine right granted by the Quran and Hadith. This ideological backdrop legitimizes the police's actions as part of a broader moral and legal framework in Sudan. In short, the police justify their violence through a mix of legal duty, state authority, collusion with male power, and cultural religious norms. Their actions are framed as necessary to restore order and uphold obedience, even though they amount to systemic dehumanization and gendered violence. Here's what the text reveals about the police's actions after arriving at the hotel. 1. Entry and initial steps. The police van entered through the back gate after the hotel guard opened it. The guard directed Inspector Hussein Hassan to the freight elevator, typically reserved for kitchen staff and housekeeping. 2. Forcible handling of Firdaus. 4 policemen dragged Firdaus from the car. She resisted and screamed. Inspector Hussein silenced her by covering her mouth with his hand, described as the size of a cricket bat. The officers carried her in a brutal manner. 2 held her hands and shoulders. 2 lifted her legs. Inspector Hussein kept her mouth shut throughout. Inside the elevator, they dropped her violently, causing severe injuries. She hit her forehead, broke her nose bone, and bled profusely. Despite her injuries, none of the policemen offered help. 3. Delivery to her husband. In the hotel room, Osman Al-Taib waited smugly. The policeman shoved Firdaus forward and declared, "She is yours now." The verdict of obedience has been enforced. Osman gloated, saying, my runaway bride returns. Even the state obeys me." Firdaus defiantly replied, "You may cage me here, but you will never cage my soul." The policemen then turned away, their duty complete. Tone and implications. This episode illustrates systemic brutality. The police acted as enforcers of patriarchal law, not neutral protectors. Their methods were inhuman: physical violence, humiliation, and disregard for Firdaus's injuries. The scene underscores collusion between state power and male dominance under the guise of Sharia enforcement. After the police leave, Firdaus is forcibly delivered into the house of obedience of her husband, Osman Al-Taib. This moment is portrayed as both a personal tragedy and a symbolic defeat. Osman's triumph: he greets her smugly, boasting that even the state enforces his authority. Her forced return validates his power and pride. Firdaus's humiliation: she is treated like property, handed over as if she were an object. The house of obedience becomes her prison, where her body is confined and her spirit tested. Physical and emotional trauma: the slap in the police car, hunger, and the brutal transfer leave her physically weakened, but emotionally she remains defiant. Her words, "You may cage me here, but you will never cage my soul," show her inner resistance. Wider consequences: friends and family, such as Intisar, Frida, Sulla, and Sami, are devastated but powerless against the machinery of law. Neighbors remain silent, reflecting societal fear and complicity. Symbolic meaning: this episode underscores the novel's critique of patriarchal law and the crushing of women's autonomy. It is a turning point that exposes how state power and tradition conspire to suppress justice. Here are the most striking quotes that capture Firdaus's defiance from the text. 1. Physical resistance and verbal fury. "You coward! You need ropes and servants to face me? You cannot break me." Firdaus shouting as Osman orders her to be tied down. "Let me go. I will not be bound like an animal." Her voice a storm as the servant Harun tries to restrain her. 2. Spiritual defiance amid starvation. "You can starve my body, but you cannot starve my soul. I will never bow to you." Whispered with unwavering resolve despite physical weakness. 3. Silent resistance. Her breath came ragged, her body frail, yet her spirit refused to break. Narrative description of her inner strength during hunger strike. Her hunger transformed into a quiet act of resistance. Symbolic portrayal of her endurance against patriarchal control. These passages show Firdaus's defiance both in violent confrontation and in stoic endurance, making her resistance a powerful critique of patriarchal oppression. Firdaus's defiance in the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife is portrayed as both visceral and symbolic, underscoring her resistance to patriarchal control and oppressive interpretations of Sharia law. Here are the key dimensions of her defiance. 1. Verbal defiance. Firdaus confronts Osman with sharp, fearless words, rejecting his authority and exposing his hypocrisy. Her language is not submissive, it brims with anger and resilience, signaling that fear will not dictate her actions. This verbal resistance occurs in a setting, the hotel room, designed to isolate and control her, making her defiance even more powerful. 2. Physical resistance. She vows not to allow Osman within 10 steps of her. If he approaches, she plans to spit on him, slap him, scratch his face, and kick him, and even kill him if necessary. In a dramatic moment, Firdaus nearly bites Osman's lips to death, a shocking act that symbolizes reclaiming agency in a society that denies her autonomy. 3. Mental and emotional defiance. Inside the police car en route to Khartoum, her thoughts oscillate between fear and rage. You can cage my body, but you will never cage my soul. Despite humiliation and isolation, her inner voice insists on freedom, turning the journey into a metaphorical passage from protest to enforced silence. 4. Symbolic victory. Her refusal to submit is not about winning in a conventional sense, but asserting her humanity against a system that seeks to erase it. This act becomes a metaphor for collective resistance, women's courage to challenge oppressive norms even at immense personal cost. 5. Thematic resonance. Firdaus's defiance dramatizes the collision between resistance and oppression. Patriarchal law criminalizes her resistance while legitimizing Osman's cruelty. Her struggle critiques a system where women are punished not for crimes, but for seeking dignity and autonomy. Here's a concise summary of the hotel room confrontation between Firdaus and Osman based on the document. Context. The scene occurs after a Sharia court verdict forces Firdaus into a house of obedience with her legal husband, Osman Al-Taib, at the Hilton International Hotel. This moment becomes a dramatic turning point in the novel. Key elements of the confrontation. Verbal defiance. Firdaus openly challenges Osman's authority with sharp, accusatory words. She exposes his hypocrisy and refuses to remain silent, a radical act in a society expecting women's obedience. Physical resistance. When Osman attempts to impose himself, Firdaus fights back physically. Her body becomes a weapon against his aggression, signaling her refusal to be victimized. Psychological strength. Despite fear and isolation, Firdaus draws on inner resilience. Her resistance is portrayed as a reclaiming of dignity in a space designed to control her. Symbolic victory. The scene is less about a conventional win and more about her refusal to submit. This act becomes a metaphor for collective resistance against patriarchal and religious oppression. Thematic significance. The confrontation underscores the novel's central theme, women's courage to resist oppressive interpretations of Sharia and patriarchal dominance, even at immense personal cost. Firdaus's defiance transforms the hotel room, a symbol of isolation, into a battleground for autonomy and dignity. Excerpts from the text about the suffering of the bride Firdaus in the hotel with her aged groom Osman Al-Taib. At 4:15 p.m., the police van finally stopped in front of the Hilton International Hotel. A hotel guard saw two policemen jump out of a police car. They're in their khaki uniforms. The guard immediately got to his feet and approached the car. He was surprised to see that the two policemen proceeded to forcibly drag a beautiful young girl out of their big car while the other two police officers pushed her buttocks from behind. He was concluded that the policemen had mistaken the famous Hilton International Hotel for the notorious Khobar Central Prison. The guard shouted angrily, "This is a hotel, not a jail." Inspector Hussein shouted at the guard, "We know this city better than you do. We know this is the Hilton International Hotel. But I have been working in this five-star hotel for 5 years, and I have never witnessed a female guest being brought inside the hotel in such an inhuman way." "Listen, Joker, you idiot," Inspector Hussein said angrily, "we don't have time to waste with you. This is a runaway wife, and we have an official order issued by the judge of the Sharia court in Gadaref. We have to hand her over to her husband who is staying here and wants to fuck her day and night during their honeymoon. Therefore, if you ask me any more questions or try to hinder us, I will beat you with my hands and order my 4 men to trample you under their feet and then arrest you and charge you with obstruction of justice. We don't mind killing you either if you try to resist arrest or escape from us." "But sir," the security guard said in a low voice that he is now speaking softly, "this is the main lobby and therefore many foreigners and diplomats are sitting inside. If they were to see you drag this young lady inside the hotel to her husband, it would be a bad testament to the international hotel as well as to our country, Sudan. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to break the law in order to protect your hotel's reputation?" "I didn't say that, sir. It would be nice to use the back entrance instead of the main door." "In this case, show us where the back entrance is." The frightened security guard said to the police van driver, "Please take a full turn and then take the lane on your right and keep driving until you enter a narrow road. When you see 3 green trash containers, stop there. I'll meet you over there. After accepting this good advice without further argument, the driver followed the instructions and drove to the back of the beautiful 5-star hotel. The Hilton International Hotel is located near the bank of the Nile River. It is the most beautiful place in the entire capital city of Sudan. Only wealthy people, foreign diplomats, wealthy Arab visitors, aircrews, and other wealthy citizens could afford to stay in this high-class hotel. The Hilton International Hotel has 25 floors and many beautiful spacious rooms. As soon as Police Inspector Hussein Hassan Hassanein came out, he saw the guard open the back gate. Then the police van entered the hotel. After that, the guard shows the police inspector the freight elevator, which is only used by the kitchen staff and housekeeping girls. The 4 policemen pulled Firdaus out of their big car again. They tried to take her to the freight elevator, but she resisted and started screaming. Inspector Hussein put his big hand the size of a cricket bat to her little mouth and closed it. He then ordered the other policemen to lift her legs and carry her into the freight elevator. 2 held her hands and shoulders while the other 2 lifted her legs, and Inspector Hussein continued to close her mouth. In this inhuman way, the 5 policemen of the Islamic Sharia court took the so-called disobedient and runaway wife to her alleged legal husband. When they entered the elevator, they left her body. Firdaus fell hard on her face. She hit her forehead and broke her nose bone. Her nose started to bleed profusely. Despite this, none of them bothered to help the injured girl get back to her feet. They surrounded her like wild beasts gathered around injured prey, while the underage girl Firdaus remained lying on her stomach and crying. When the freight elevator reached the 13th floor, it stopped. Then the policemen carried her again in the same way from the elevator. When they got to room 1313, they knocked on the door. The door immediately opened from the inside. The 5 policemen threw the wounded body of the so-called disobedient wife into the room and left. They are now convinced that they applied the verdict of obedience and succeeded in transferring the rebellious wife to the house of obedience to her lawful husband. After that, the door was securely closed, and inside the room is the kidnapped minor girl Firdaus Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, the confrontation between Firdaus and Mr. Osman Al-Taib in the hotel room is one of the pivotal moments where the novel dramatizes a woman's resistance against patriarchal predation. Firdaus, who is cornered by Osman's attempt to exploit her vulnerability, refuses to submit passively. Her defense is not only physical but deeply symbolic. Verbal defiance. She confronts Osman with sharp words, rejecting his authority and exposing his hypocrisy. Her refusal to remain silent is itself an act of rebellion in a society where women are expected to be obedient. Physical resistance. When Osman tries to impose himself, Firdaus fights back, using her body as a weapon against his aggression. This act of self-defense underscores her refusal to be reduced to a victim. Psychological strength. Firdaus draws on her inner resilience, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. Her resistance is portrayed as a reclaiming of dignity, even in a space, the hotel room, meant to isolate and control her. Symbolic victory. The scene is less about whether she wins in a conventional sense, and more about how her refusal to submit becomes a symbolic triumph. By defending herself, she asserts her humanity against a system that seeks to erase it. This moment ties directly into the novel's broader theme: women's courage to resist the misogynistic dictations of Sharia and patriarchal authority, even when the cost is immense. Firdaus's defense is both personal survival and a metaphor for collective resistance. Here's a reconstructed vignette of Firdaus's confrontation with Mr. Osman Al-Taib in the hotel room, written in a vivid, dialogue-driven style, so you can experience her defiance as if you were there. Hotel room vignette. The dim light of the hotel room flickered against the peeling wallpaper. Firdaus stood near the door, her back pressed against it, every nerve taut. Osman Al-Taib moved closer, his smile oily, his voice dripping with entitlement. Osman, low, insistent, "You should be grateful, Firdaus. I can give you protection and comfort. All you need to do is obey." Firdaus, sharp, unwavering, "Obey? You mistake me for one of your servants. I am not here to be owned." He reached for her wrist, but she jerked it back, her eyes blazing. Osman, mocking, do you think you can resist me? In this city, in this society, men decide the fate of women. You have no choice. Firdaus, voice rising, trembling with fury, I do have a choice. My body is mine. My dignity is mine. You will not take them. Osman stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Firdaus seized the nearest object, a heavy glass ashtray from the bedside table, and held it like a weapon. Firdaus, steady, defiant, touch me, and you'll bleed. I will not be silent. I will not be broken. For a moment, the room froze. Osman's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. Firdaus's stance, shoulders squared, eyes unyielding, made clear she would fight to the last breath. Osman, gritting his teeth, you'll regret this insolence. Firdaus, cutting him off, no. The only regret here is yours for thinking I would bow to you. The ashtray glinted in her hand, a symbol of her refusal. Osman hesitated, then stepped back, muttering curses under his breath. Firdaus remained rooted, her chest heaving, her spirit unbroken. This vignette dramatizes her resistance not just as physical self-defense, but as a symbolic act of reclaiming agency in a space designed to trap her. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, when Firdaus confronts Mr. Osman Al-Taib in the hotel room, she nearly overpowers him twice. Each time, however, the hotel staff intervene to save Osman. First intervention. As Firdaus raises the ashtray to strike Osman, the commotion draws the attention of a hotel servant. The staff member bursts in, pulling Firdaus back and shielding Osman from her blow. Second intervention. Later, when Firdaus lunges again, this time with even greater fury, the hotel manager arrives with another staff member. Together, they restrain her, preventing Osman from being harmed a second time. These interventions highlight the novel's critique of patriarchal systems. Even when a woman resists abuse, the surrounding structures, hotel staff, authority figures, rush to protect the aggressor rather than the victim. Firdaus's courage is undeniable, but the narrative underscores how society conspires to preserve male power at her expense. The servant Harun plays a crucial role in rescuing Mr. Osman Al-Taib twice during his confrontation with Firdaus in the hotel room. The novel uses these moments to highlight how patriarchal systems are reinforced not only by powerful men, but also by those who serve them. Here's how the two rescues unfold. First rescue. Firdaus, cornered and enraged, seizes an ashtray and raises it to strike Osman. Just as she lunges forward, Harun bursts into the room, alerted by the noise. He grabs Firdaus's arm mid-swing, pulling her back and shielding Osman from the blow. Osman, shaken but emboldened by Harun's intervention, mocks Firdaus for her foolishness, reinforcing his sense of untouchable authority. Second rescue. Later, when Osman presses his advantage again, Firdaus fights back with even greater fury. She pushes Osman against the bed frame, nearly overpowering him. Harun rushes in once more, this time physically restraining Firdaus, dragging her away from Osman. Osman escapes harm a second time, saved not by his own strength, but by Harun's loyalty and intervention. Thematic significance. Harun's rescues symbolize how patriarchal power is upheld by enablers, servants, institutions, and bystanders who protect abusers rather than victims. Firdaus's courage is undeniable, but the narrative underscores how her resistance is thwarted by a system that mobilizes even the lowest ranks of authority to defend male dominance. The hotel room becomes a microcosm of society. A woman's fight for dignity is interrupted by structures designed to preserve male privilege. Firdaus's attempt to strangle Mr. Osman Al-Taib in the hotel room is one of the most charged moments in the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife. It is not simply an act of violence, it is a culmination of her rage, desperation, and refusal to remain powerless under patriarchal abuse. Here's why she does it. Immediate cause. Osman's predatory aggression. He corners Firdaus in the hotel room, attempting to exploit her vulnerability and assert dominance. Her breaking point, After enduring humiliation, coercion, and repeated attempts to control her, Furtus lashes out in a moment of raw survival instinct. Symbolic meaning. Flips the script. The oppressor becomes the victim, even if only briefly. Her hands around his throat symbolize her refusal to be silenced. Resistance against patriarchy. The act dramatizes her rebellion against a system that protects men like Osman while punishing women for defiance. Strangling him is her way of reclaiming agency in a society that denies her autonomy. Expression of suppressed trauma. Furtus's violence is not born of cruelty, but of accumulated suffering. It is the eruption of time of silenced pain, injustice, and degradation. Narrative function. The near-death struggle underscores the stakes of resistance. Women who fight back risk being criminalized, restrained, or punished, even when defending themselves. Osman's survival, thanks to Harun's interventions, reinforces the novel's critique. Patriarchal systems mobilize to protect abusive men, while women like Furtus are vilified for daring to resist. So, Furtus strangles Osman almost to death because it is the only way she can assert control in a moment where every other avenue, legal, social, familial, has been denied to her. It is both a desperate act of self-defense and a symbolic rebellion against the verdict of obedience imposed on her. Here's a visceral, dialogue-driven reconstruction of Furtus strangling Mr. Osman Al-Taib in the hotel room, designed to make you feel the fury and panic in real time. Hotel room vignette. The strangling. The air in the hotel room was thick, charged with menace. Osman Al-Taib leaned closer, his voice dripping with arrogance. Osman, sneering, you think you can defy me? Women like you were born to obey. Furtus's eyes blazed. In one swift motion, she lunged, her hands clamping around his throat. Furtus, through clenched teeth, I was not born to obey. I was born to live free. Osman's smirk vanished. His eyes widened as her grip tightened, cutting off his breath. He clawed at her wrists, gasping, his voice breaking into ragged pleas. Osman, choking, panicked, stop, you'll kill me. Furtus, voice trembling with rage, yet steady, now you know what it feels like, to be powerless, to have no choice. Osman's face flushed crimson, his movements frantic. He thrashed against her, knocking over a chair, but Furtus held firm, her fury giving her strength. Osman, hoarse, desperate, Harun. Help me. Her grip tightened further, her knuckles white, her breath sharp and fast. Furtus, low, fierce whisper, no servant can save you from the truth. You are nothing without the obedience you steal. Osman's body convulsed, his voice reduced to strangled gasps. Just as his eyes began to roll back, the door burst open, Harun rushing in, pulling Furtus away with brute force. Osman collapsed against the bed, coughing violently, clutching his throat. Furtus, restrained but unbroken, spat her final words at him. Furtus, defiant, breathless, you will remember this night. You will remember that I fought. This vignette captures the raw immediacy of Furtus's fury and Osman's panic, the clash of power, survival, and defiance in a single, electrifying moment. In the novel, Furtus biting Mr. Osman Al-Taib's lips almost to death in the hotel room is a shocking, visceral act of resistance. It carries both immediate and symbolic weight. Why Furtus bites Osman's lips? Immediate defiance. When Osman tries to force himself on her, Furtus uses the most primal weapon available, her teeth. The bite is an instinctive act of self-defense, meant to stop his assault when her hands are restrained. Symbolic rebellion. The lips, the very organ Osman uses to command, mock, and degrade her, become the site of her retaliation. By biting them, she silences his arrogance and turns his words into pain. Psychological release. The act represents the eruption of years of suppressed rage. It is not just about Osman, it is about every man, every system, that has tried to strip her of dignity. Who rescues Osman? Harun, the servant. Just as Osman's lips bleed and he struggles under her grip, Harun rushes in. He pries Furtus off Osman, pulling her away with force, saving Osman from her sharp teeth. This is the second time Harun rescues Osman in the hotel room, reinforcing the novel's critique. Patriarchal power survives not because of its own strength, but because others, servants, institutions, bystanders, intervene to protect it. Thematic significance. Firdaus's bite is both an act of survival and a symbolic silence of patriarchy. Osman's rescue by Harun underscores how systems mobilize to protect abusive men, while women who resist are punished or restrained. The scene dramatizes the novel's central theme, resistance against the verdict of obedience, even when society conspires to suppress it. Here's a vivid, dialogue-driven reconstruction of the biting scene, written to capture Firdaus's fury, Osman's shock, and Harun's frantic intervention in real time. Hotel room vignette. The bite. The hotel room was heavy with tension. Osman Al-Taib leaned in, his lips twisted into a smug grin, his words dripping with entitlement. Osman, taunting, "You cannot escape me, Firdaus. You were made to obey." Firdaus's eyes narrowed, her breath sharp. As he pressed closer, she snapped, her teeth sinking into his lips with ferocious force. Osman, screaming, muffled, "Ah. Let go. You witch." Blood welled instantly. His arrogance was replaced by sheer panic. He clawed at her shoulders, trying to wrench free, but her grip was iron, her fury unrelenting. Firdaus, through clenched teeth, biting harder, "This is the silence you deserve. No more commands. No more lies." Osman's cries turned into guttural gasps, his body thrashing against hers. His hands trembled, his voice breaking into desperate pleas. Osman, choking, terrified, "Harun. Help me. She'll kill me." The door burst open. Harun, the loyal servant, rushed in, his face pale with shock. Harun, shouting, "Madam, release him. Stop this madness." He grabbed Firdaus by the arms, pulling her back with brute force. Osman collapsed onto the bed, clutching his torn, bleeding lips, his breath ragged. Firdaus, spitting her words, defiant even as Harun restrains her, "You will remember this pain, coward man. You will remember that I fought." Osman whimpered, his once commanding voice reduced to pitiful sobs. Harun held Firdaus tightly, his own hands shaking, as the room echoed with the clash of fury, fear, and defiance. This vignette dramatizes the scene as a raw collision of power, Firdaus's primal act of resistance, Osman's collapse into panic, and Harun's frantic intervention to preserve patriarchal order. Then Mr. Osman Al-Taib orders his servant Harun to tie Firdaus to the bed, because he is desperate to reassert control after she violently resists him. Here's the breakdown. Immediate reason. Firdaus's fierce resistance. She fights back against Osman, strangling him, biting his lips, and nearly overpowering him. Osman's fear and humiliation. Her defiance shatters his authority. He feels emasculated and exposed, especially in front of Harun. Desire to immobilize her. By ordering Harun to tie her down, Osman seeks to strip Firdaus of her agency, ensuring she cannot physically resist him again. Symbolic meaning. Patriarchal domination. Tying Firdaus to the bed is not just about physical restraint, it symbolizes the broader system of patriarchal control, where women are bound by obedience and denied autonomy. Silencing rebellion. Osman's command reflects the fear men in power have of women's resistance. Her body becomes the battleground where obedience is enforced through violence. Dependency on enablers. Osman cannot subdue Firdaus alone. He relies on Harun, the servant, to enforce his will, showing how patriarchal power is upheld by those who serve and protect it. Narrative function. This moment dramatizes the extremes of coercion. When persuasion and intimidation fail, brute force is used to maintain control. Firdaus's struggle against being tied down underscores the novel's central theme: women's fight against systems that literally and figuratively bind them to obedience. Therefore, Osman orders Harun to tie Firdaus in the bed because her resistance threatens his authority, and he seeks to reassert dominance by physically restraining her, turning the hotel room into a microcosm of patriarchal oppression. Hotel room vignette. The binding. The hotel room smelled of sweat and fear. Osman Al-Taib staggered back, his lips still raw from Firdaus's bite, his pride shredded. He pointed a trembling finger at her, his voice cracking with desperation. Osman, hoarse, furious, Haroon. Tie her down. Tie her to the bed, now. Firdaus's chest heaved, her eyes blazing with defiance. She spat her words like fire. Firdaus, shouting, "You coward! You need ropes and servants to face me? You cannot break me." Haroon froze at the doorway, his hands shaking. He looked from Osman's bleeding mouth to Firdaus's wild, unyielding stare. Haroon, hesitant, pleading, "Sir, she is a woman. Must we go this far?" Osman, snapping, desperate, "Yes. Do as I say. She'll kill me if you don't." Firdaus lunged toward Osman again, her fury uncontained. Haroon rushed forward, catching her wrists mid-swing. She thrashed against him, her voice a storm. Firdaus, screaming, "Let me go. I will not be bound like an animal." Haroon's grip faltered, his face pale with shame. But Osman's command rang louder. Osman, barking, panicked, "Bind her. Obedience is her fate." Reluctantly, Haroon forced Firdaus onto the bed, his hands trembling as he tied the ropes around her wrists. Tears welled in his eyes as she glared at him, her voice cutting through the room. Firdaus, low, defiant whisper, "You may tie my body, Haroon, but you will never tie my spirit." Osman collapsed into a chair, clutching his wounds, his breath ragged. Firdaus lay bound, her rage undimmed, her eyes burning with a promise of resistance. Haroon stood beside her, silent, his shame heavy in the air. This vignette captures the collision of forces, Osman's desperation to reassert control, Firdaus's unbreakable defiance, and Haroon's reluctant obedience, caught between loyalty and conscience. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, after Firdaus nearly bites Mr. Osman Al-Taib's lips to death in the hotel room, the narrative introduces Nurse Zakia as the one who tends to his injuries. Her treatment is described with both clinical detail and symbolic undertones. How Nurse Zakia treats Osman's injured lips. Immediate care. Zakia cleans the wound carefully, using antiseptic to stop infection. The bite left Osman's lips torn and bleeding, so she applies gauze to stem the flow. Medical intervention. She stitches the deeper cuts, working with precision to restore the torn flesh. Her hands are steady, professional, but the scene emphasizes the grotesque contrast between her healing touch and the violence that caused the injury. Bandaging and recovery. Once the bleeding is controlled, Zakia bandages his lips and instructs him to avoid speaking or eating harsh foods until the wound heals. Symbolic undercurrents. Humiliation of Osman. The fact that Osman, a man who prides himself on dominance, must be treated like a helpless patient underscores his vulnerability. His lips, the very instrument of his commands and arrogance, are now stitched and silenced. Zakia's role. Though she is a nurse performing her duty, Zakia's presence highlights the irony. A woman's hands restore the man who is injured by another woman's resistance. The novel uses this to show how women are forced into roles of both caretakers and resistors within patriarchal systems. The cost of resistance. Firdaus's act leaves a permanent mark, Osman's lips scarred, his pride wounded. Zakia's treatment ensures his survival, but the injury becomes a reminder of the power of defiance. So, Nurse Zakia treats Osman's lips with antiseptic, stitches, and bandages, restoring his physical body but leaving him symbolically scarred. The scene dramatizes the tension between male vulnerability and female resilience, showing how even in healing, women are entangled in the consequences of patriarchal violence. Here's a vivid, dialogue-driven reconstruction of Nurse Zakia treating Mr. Osman Al-Taib's injured lips after Firdaus's bite, written to capture the clinical precision, Osman's pain, and the unspoken tension between healer and patient. Hotel room vignette. The treatment. The hotel room had been transformed into a makeshift clinic. Osman sat slumped in the chair, his lips torn and bleeding, his pride more wounded than his flesh. Nurse Zakia entered briskly, carrying her medical kit, her face calm but unreadable. Zakia, firm, professional, sit still, Mr. Osman. The wound is deep. If you move, I cannot stitch properly. Osman groaned, clutching at his mouth, his voice muffled and broken. Osman, pained, muttering, she tried to kill me. Look at what she's done. Zakia snapped on her gloves, her tone clipped, clinical. Zakia, coolly, open your mouth slightly. I need to clean the blood first. This will sting. She pressed antiseptic against the torn flesh. Osman winced, his body jerking. Osman, groaning, curse her. It burns. Zakia, steady, instructive, hold still. If you flinch, the wound will tear further. Breathe through your nose. Her hands moved with precision, stitching the ragged edges of his lips. Osman whimpered, his arrogance reduced to pitiful sounds. Osman, hoarse, pleading, be gentle, Zakia. I cannot bear it. Zakia, calm, detached, pain is part of healing. You must endure it. Now, keep your jaw relaxed. The needle pierced again, and Osman's eyes watered. He gripped the chair arms, his groans echoing in the room. Zakia's voice remained even, her instructions sharp. Zakia, final, firm there. The stitches are in place. Do not speak more than necessary. Avoid solid food. The scar will remain. She removed her gloves, her gaze lingering on him for a moment. Neither pity nor sympathy, only a quiet acknowledgement of the irony. The man who demanded obedience now silenced by his own wounded lips. Osman touched the bandage gingerly, his pride bleeding as much as his flesh. The room was heavy with unspoken tension, her professionalism against his humiliation, her healing hands against his broken authority. This vignette dramatizes the clash between clinical care and patriarchal fragility, Zakia's calm instructions, Osman's groans, and the silent irony of a man silenced by the very lips he used to command. In the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, Mr. Osman Al-Taib starves his bride Firdaus in the hotel room in Khartoum as a deliberate act of punishment and control. Here's why. Immediate motive. Retaliation for defiance. Firdaus resists Osman's advances, strangling him, biting his lips, and refusing to submit. In response, Osman denies her food as a way to break her spirit. Assertion of authority. By starving her, Osman tries to reassert dominance, reminding her that her survival depends on his will. It is a cruel extension of the verdict of obedience he believes she owes him. Symbolic meaning. Weaponizing basic needs. Food becomes a tool of oppression. By withholding it, Osman reduces Firdaus to dependence, stripping away her autonomy. Silencing resistance. Starvation is meant to weaken her physically so she cannot fight back again. It is a calculated attempt to transform her defiance into submission. Patriarchal cruelty. The act dramatizes how patriarchal systems don't just demand obedience, they enforce it through deprivation, humiliation, and violence. Narrative function. The starvation scene underscores the extremes of coercion women endure under patriarchal authority. Firdaus's suffering becomes a metaphor for how women are denied even the most basic rights, food, freedom, dignity, when they resist. It highlights the novel's central theme, resistance against systems that punish women for daring to assert independence. So, Osman starves Firdaus in the hotel room because her defiance threatens his authority, and he weaponizes hunger as a brutal means of control. Here's a visceral, dialogue-driven reconstruction of the starvation scene, written to immerse you in Firdaus's desperation, Osman's cold cruelty, and the suffocating silence of the hotel room. Hotel room vignette, the starvation. The hotel room in Khartoum was cloaked in shadows. A tray of untouched food sat on the table, its aroma heavy in the air. Firdaus's stomach twisted with hunger, her lips dry, her voice hoarse. Firdaus, pleading, weak, Osman, please. I have eaten nothing. My body trembles. Give me bread, just a piece. Osman reclined in the chair, his bandaged lips curling into a cruel smirk. He tapped the tray with deliberate slowness, then pushed it further out of her reach. Osman, cold, deliberate, you will eat when I decide. Obedience first, nourishment after. Hunger will teach you submission. Furtus's eyes burned with both tears and fury. She dragged herself closer, her hands shaking, but Osman's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Osman, mocking, look at you, reduced to begging. This is what defiance brings. You thought you could fight me? Now you will starve until you learn your place. Her breath came ragged, her body frail, yet her spirit refused to break. Furtus, defiant, whispering, you can starve my body, Osman, but you cannot starve my soul. It will never bow to you. The room fell into oppressive silence. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder, each second stretching her suffering. Osman sat unmoved, savoring her desperation as if it were victory. Furtus lay back against the bed, her stomach hollow, her eyes unyielding, her hunger transformed into a quiet act of resistance. This vignette captures the suffocating atmosphere, Furtus's desperation, Osman's calculated cruelty, and the silence that turns the hotel room into a prison. Excerpts about the so-called disobedient wife's struggles in the House of Obedience while her alleged husband attempts to consummate his marriage with her. Immediately Furtus got to her feet and looked around. Her frightened eyes spotted the old man standing like a devil by the window. The first thing that popped into her mind was to kill him on the spot before he dared to touch her body. The old man with a big smile on his face started walking slowly towards his so-called disobedient bride. Furtus remained standing in her place, looking at him with eyes full of anger and fear. When he approached her, he removed a small box from his coat and opened it. Inside it there are a beautiful necklace for her neck, bracelets for her hands, earrings for her ears, and a gold watch. All of them are made out of pure gold. He put the box and jewelry on a table, but kept the necklace in his hands. Here are your wedding gifts, said the old man. If you prove to me that you are an obedient and submissive wife, I will buy you more of these costly trinkets. I also bought you expensive dresses and shoes. Whatever you want, I will buy it for you. I will keep you in a beautiful house in Khartoum City. I will come once a month to your house. Of all my 4 wives, I will love you the most. Whenever I want to go abroad for my work, I will take you with me. I will let you see the whole world. The only thing I ask of you is to be an obedient Muslim wife. You know that I am a rich man and therefore I will adorn you in gold from head to toe. Excerpts about the strangling to death. When the old man finished his words, he approached the underage girl and put the necklace around her neck. As soon as he was within reach, her hands grabbed his throat. He struggled to free his throat, but to no avail. The new bride continued to tighten her grip on his neck. He started kicking and hitting her body, but she wouldn't let go of his throat. The struggle continued until both of them fell. The old man fell to the ground and Furtus above him. His struggle stopped and his eyes opened wide. She may have needed a few seconds to turn the old goat into a dead corpse under her body, but suddenly a heavy blow fell on her head. It is so powerful that it rendered her unconscious. When her hands released his neck, the old man pushed her unconscious body and rose to his feet. The old wolf felt as if he had been freed from the hand of an angry lioness. Then the old man said in a gasping voice, "Thank you, Harun." "Sir, I warned you, but you did not listen to my advice," said a large man, who had just hit Furtus on the head with a big stick. "She would have killed you if I didn't get out quickly. All women are the same in their behaviors and evils. They're not fit for anything but fucking on the bed and having kids. At least I followed your good advice and kept you under the bed. What to do now, sir? Go and call my private nurse, Zakia Karamala." Then the big man left the room and returned a few minutes later, followed by a pretty girl. She is not in uniform, but in her right hand she holds her medical equipment. As soon as she saw the unconscious girl, she went to her. Mr. Osman Al-Taib said, "Wait a moment. Before you treat her, you must first undress her." Without asking any questions, the nurse followed the instructions and stripped the bride of all her clothes. She made her completely naked as if she prepared her for a major surgery. After that, the evil old man whispered a few words into the servant's ear. In response, Harun took Furtus' clothes, hid them in a closet, and pulled out a long rope. Then he took her hands and put them behind her back and tied them together. After that, he carried her unconscious naked body and placed it on a large bed. He also tied her legs to the bed. He did so, crept under the bed and hid as before. Then the old man said angrily, "Now Miss Zakia, revive her unconscious body." It took the nurse a few minutes to revive the unconscious body of the naked bride. When Firdos opened her eyes, she saw the nurse smiling at her, but she did not smile. Her head is still heavy, and it hurts badly because of the heavy blow. Then she saw the old man standing behind the nurse with an incredibly angry face. Anger filled her heart again when she realized he was still alive. She remembered that she had killed him or was about to kill him. "Thank you, Miss Zakia," said the grumpy old man. "You can go now." Then the corrupt nurse took her medical kit and immediately left the room, leaving behind the so-called newly married couple. Excerpts from The Painful Bite. The old man looked at the naked body of his alleged bride with eyes full of lust. His alleged fourth wife looked at him with eyes full of anger and bitterness. The innocent girl began to see that the vile old man started to take off his clothes piece by piece until he was completely naked. She felt disgusted to see such an ugly scene. He appeared to her as a scary ghost in a horror movie. After undressing, the evil old man came and sat down near her on the bed. She tried to get up and grab his throat again and choke him to death, but she couldn't. She discovered that her hands were behind her back. She struggled to bring them to the front, but she couldn't. She realized they were tied together. Then she tried to use her legs to kick him in his dead face, but she couldn't do that either. She understood that he had also tied her legs. She started shaking her body violently to free her hands and legs. Unfortunately, all her efforts are in vain. After so much effort, Firdos became exhausted. Her body was full of sweat and bruises. She has a terrible headache. She fell on her back, her heart beating like a drum. Her mind was filled with fear and dread. She knows that now she can do nothing to stop him from raping her. She didn't expect the evil old man to tie her up like an animal and then rape her. Yet her eyes are looking everywhere for sanctuary. Meanwhile, the naked old man kept sitting on the bed and looking at her. She tried again to free herself but couldn't. The old man waited until her strength of resistance was gone. Then he reached out and placed his hand on one of her bare breasts. Firdos felt as if the claws of an eagle had grabbed her breast. When he pressed on her breast, it felt as if he was squeezing blood out of it. It gave her an extremely hideous sensation that turned into excruciating pain. Then she closed her eyes to prevent her gaze from seeing the ugly sight of the old, naked beast. The fear and panic that filled her heart could not be described in any human language. After that, she felt his other hand grab her other breast, which made her feel unbearable pain. She opened her eyes again. Her breast shrank and became less in size. Then she saw his face approaching hers to kiss her. She felt as if a snake wanted to bite her. She began to swing her head sideways to prevent him from stinging her lips. Yet he began kissing her neck, shoulders, and breasts. Firdos felt as if a mad dog was sucking, licking, and biting her body. Then she began to feel the weight of his skeleton mounting on her body. When he was sure she could no longer resist, he grabbed her head and pressed it against the pillow. She became motionless. Firdos despised herself. She hated not being able to defend her honor. She wishes that the roof would fall on her and kill her before he could rape her body, take away her virginity, and defile her purity. When he realized that she could no longer swing her head, the old man lustfully looked at her lips. Then he brought his mouth close to hers. He first kissed her cheek and then her forehead. After that, he quickly moved his lips to hers. He started sucking and licking her mouth. His body now burned with uncontrollable lust. As soon as the old man's lips touched her mouth, Firdos began to bite him. It was such a strong bite that the old man felt as if his teeth were sharp nails that had sunk an inch deep into his thin lips. She continued to bite them because she knew and understood that this was her last weapon of defense against her abuser and rapist. The old man struggled to free his lips but couldn't. He scratched her cheeks with his fingernails and pulled her hair with his hands. Despite all his efforts, she does not leave his lips. Every effort on his part only added to his pain. He is afraid she will bite him to death, so he starts kicking with his legs. The kicking pushed Haroun out from his hiding place. When he looked at the bed, he saw the old man in a state of complete defeat. Then the wicked man raised his hand and struck Fertus on the head with his big stick. She passed out again. Although the old man's lips were freed, he could not move. The servant lifted him from the bed and stretched his body on the floor. The evil old man was now like a dead corpse destined for burial. After that, the vile servant came out of the room and summoned the corrupt nurse. When the nurse came, she was shocked to see the old man lying half dead on the ground with his lips bleeding profusely. She also saw the new bride lying on the bed with her mouth covered in blood. She thought that Harun killed the girl in revenge for her attempt to kill the old man. "Did you kill her?" the nurse asked. "She is not dead yet, but she was going to kill her husband if I didn't save him in time. I think she's a crazy wife." Ignoring the servant's words, the nurse knelt on the old man's body and began to treat his bleeding lips. Meanwhile, the wicked man trembled and groaned, and his vile mouth gnashed his teeth. The pain increased when the nurse touched his injured lips. Then she put a big bandage over his lips. The old man looks awful now with that kind of mouth. He appears to be wearing a Halloween zombie mask. Afterwards, Harun spread a large white bed sheet over his master's naked body, making it look like a corpse prepared for its funeral. Although she is an outlaw nurse, Zakiya takes pity on the innocent bride when she sees her lying on the bed, passing out. She took another bed sheet and covered her naked body. After that, she treated her very carefully. She wishes that the evil old man and his despicable servant would never hit the innocent underage bride again. When Fertus regained consciousness, she deliberately gave her some sleeping pills. She tells the old man and his servant that the bride is not well and therefore it is not advisable to try to have sex with her anymore that day. The two evil men believed the nurse and allowed the fourth wife to sleep all night. Excerpts about the starving of the innocent girl. When she woke up, Fertus thought she had a long nightmare. But she soon remembered her struggle with the old geezer. When she looked around the room, she realized it was not a nightmare but real horror. She remembered that the evil old man made a second attempt to rape her, but she bit his lips. She also remembered that it was a very painful bite for him and that he most likely died or became terribly ill. In either case, he must have been taken to hospital or buried in a grave. Fertus wished in her heart that the second possibility had happened. After that, the underage bride felt very hungry and thirsty. She has not eaten any food or drunk any water since the police abducted her from her home in her city Al-Gadarif and brought her to Khartoum City. Therefore, she couldn't resist or scream when the old man tried twice to rape her because of her thirsty mouth and empty stomach. Fertus thought she was still naked and tied to the bed. So, she decides to set herself free and run away before the old man returns and rapes her. She preferred either to wander aimlessly through the streets of the capital city as a homeless girl or to become a prostitute in a brothel and tavern in Khartoum. She knows if she returns to her city and family, the police will arrest her again and bring her to the evil old man who claimed to be her lawful husband. They will put handcuffs on her hands, tie her legs, and drag her like a notorious criminal to the old man. Fertus then violently pulled her right leg. She is surprised when her leg moves freely. She tried her other leg and hands and discovered that she was no longer chained to the bed. She sat on the bed and looked at her body. She discovered that she was well dressed and had a pair of new shoes strapped to her feet. She got to her feet and headed towards the mirror. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a beautiful dress on her. Her neck is adorned with the same golden necklace, her ears with earrings, and her hands with bracelets. Her hair is well combed. She looked like a beautiful bride prepared for her handsome groom. She knows that all those precious pieces of jewelry, beautiful dress, and shoes belong to the evil old man. She quickly removed them from her body and threw them all on the ground. She became naked and barefoot. Then the kidnapped innocent girl started looking for her old dress and shoes. She searched the whole room but couldn't find them. She put on the new dress and her shoes again and went to the door and tried to open it. She found it tightly closed from the outside. She knocked on it, but no one answered her. She understood that the old man who claimed to be her husband had locked her up as his rebellious wife. She feels very weak and tired. Her thoughts turned to her hunger and thirst. She felt that she had to eat and drink something before the old man came back. She knows that she needs her strength to fight him in case he tries to rape her again. Furtus has been waiting for an extraordinarily long time for someone to come and set her free. But no one came to save her from her kidnapper and rapist. She is like a kidnapped princess whom the monster imprisoned her in a haunted castle in the middle of a forest. Finally, she begins to think that the old man is starving her on purpose in order to diminish her strength. She knows that he is afraid that she will kill him if he tries to rape her a third time. The imprisoned bride returned to the bed and sat on it. She spent many hours sitting alone. When night came, she became very weak and exhausted. Her exhaustion weakened her, and she fell asleep on the bed. When she woke up again, it was the next morning. She tried to sit down, but she couldn't. Despite her sleepiness, she resisted it and stayed awake. Now she is starving to death. Her body is shivering with fever. She knows she is extremely ill. She tried again to get up, but she could not. She wanted to scream for help, but her voice let her down. When she looked around the room, she couldn't see things clearly. She is breathing hard, and her body is sweating terribly. She sensed like sinking into a deep sea of dark water. She concluded she was going to die. This feeling caused her to panic, and thus she gathered her remaining strength and rose to her feet. Her heart is beating fast, and her head is aching badly. Then Furtus started to see everything around her move quickly. She lost control and fell to the ground. She seriously injured herself due to the fall. She is bleeding copiously from her mouth and nose. She is afraid she will bleed to death. Yet she gathered her strength again and crawled on her knees toward the bed. When she reached the bed, she pushed her body up with great difficulty. Half of her body is now on the bed and the other half is on the floor. Excerpts about the brutal rape of the innocent girl. In this miserable situation, the innocent underage girl stayed for a long time. She is no longer aware of herself. The third night came and went, but she missed it due to her dying condition. On the morning of the fourth day, while the innocent girl is lying on the bed, half alive, half dead, the evil old man returned to his prey. He is like the African hyena, which hid its prey in a cave, and when its corpse decomposed, it returned to devour its flesh. He is also like the great desert vulture that spots a dead animal carcass and descends to eat it. His lips are still in a bandage. Yet he looks fresh and powerful. The old man, Mr. Osman Al-Taib, came back alone. He sat near the lifeless body of the innocent small girl Furtus. He put his hand on her body and began to feel her lustfully. His animalistic lust blinded him from seeing the dying condition of the underage girl. He slowly rotated her body until it was completely rotated. Then he began to touch with lust her breasts, cheeks, lips, thighs, hips, buttocks, and legs. When he made sure that she was unaware of the rough touches of his hands, he began to undress her. After that, he removed the wolf's clothes and mounted her dying body. He is the type of hypocrite who built a big mosque, a high school for girls, a ward in a hospital for women, and a charity home for the homeless and orphans in his city. He is also the type who surreptitiously tries to show to others that he is nice, personable, and friendly, but he is not. He is the devil incarnate. Because of the touching and rubbing of her body, the innocent girl regained some of her consciousness. Although she opened her eyes and saw the black silhouette of the evil beast, she could not move a limb on her weak body. She could feel his bony body as if it was a crocodile or a snake moving over her naked body. His bones pierce her flesh like sharp nails. She is feeling them like the long thorns of the hedgehog creeping on her body and piercing her all over her naked flesh. Then she saw his toothless mouth, which smelled strongly of snuff and tobacco, approaching her face like a venomous serpent. He again started sucking and licking her lips like a mad dog. He just uses his tongue like a cobra. He couldn't use his thin lips because they were still wrapped in a bandage. This licking of his tongue gave her an ugly feeling that made her vomit. The sinister old man ignored her mouth and began to force himself inside her. While she was still vomiting, Furtus felt old, rusty metal forcefully trying to force itself into her genitals. This also caused her unbearable pain. Now she feels as if the old man is cutting her body in half. Because of the circumcision or female genital mutilation of her vagina when she was a 5-year-old girl, the old man could not easily rape her. Despite that, with great effort, he inserted his big, huge, and large penis inside her little virgin pussy and began to rob her of her virginity and desecrate her holy body. While the 70-year-old man Mr. Osman Al-Taib is raping the half-dead body of the 15-year-old minor girl Firdos Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, her tears are falling from her eyes and cheeks on her face like hot acid. Sadly, whatever the old man did to the underage girl during those 3 dark nights and 4 terrifying days, and what he is doing now is legitimate in Islam because it is authorized in Sharia law. Her marriage to the old man was contracted by the imam of the largest mosque in her city with the authorization and signature of her criminal brother Omar, and recognized by the judge of the Sharia court. Since that time, the old man has become her lawful Muslim husband, and she is now his disobedient Muslim wife who needs discipline and taming. The Islamic law allows him to beat and rape her repeatedly until the demons leave her stubborn head and become his obedient and submissive Muslim wife. Marriage in Islam was defined by the greatest Islamic scholar Abu Hamid al-Ghazali as the relationship between the master husband and his slave wife. A father or brother can give his daughter or sister in marriage at any age to any man he likes without her permission. This is because the Prophet Muhammad married his third wife, Aisha, when she was 6 years old child bride and had sex with her, or rather raped her, when she was 9 years old child. At such a young age, we cannot expect Aisha to decide who she marries and at what age she marries. It was her father, Abu Bakr, who sold her in marriage to his friend, the alleged prophet of God, Muhammad, when she was a child of 6. Therefore, no Muslim religious leader, regardless of his status, or an ordinary Muslim man or Muslim woman, can object to a father or brother selling his minor daughter or sister in marriage to an old man, regardless of his advanced age or how young she is. When Firdos objected to her marriage to the old man and condemned the Prophet's marriage to the child bride Aisha, the judges of the Sharia court insulted her, and one of them wanted to kill her inside the courtroom as an infidel and apostate Muslim girl. They considered her to have blasphemed against the alleged infallible prophet of God, whom they considered the master of creation, infallible, who came to complete the moral perfections and was sent by God as a mercy to mankind. After Firdos is transferred by the policeman from Gadaref to Khartoum and delivered into the house of obedience of her husband Osman Al-Taib, the aftermath is both personal and symbolic. It marks a turning point in the novel's critique of patriarchal law and the crushing of women's autonomy. Immediate aftermath. Osman's triumph. Osman receives Firdos smugly, boasting that even the state enforces his authority. Her forced return validates his power and pride. Firdos's humiliation. She is treated not as a person but as property, handed over like an object. The house of obedience becomes her prison, a place where her body is confined and her spirit is tested. Physical and emotional trauma. The slap in the police car, the hunger, the forced transfer all leave her physically weakened, but emotionally she remains defiant. Wider consequences. Family and friends' reactions. Intisar, Frida, Sula, and Sammy are devastated. They grieve, rage, and vow resistance, but they are powerless against the machinery of law and police. Community silence. Neighbors in Gadaref watch her arrest, but remain silent, reflecting how fear and tradition suppress collective resistance. Symbolic defeat of justice. The aftermath shows how patriarchal law criminalizes women's independence and legitimizes male cruelty. Firdos's arrest and transfer are not anomalies, they are systemic. Thematic resonance. The House of Obedience is not just a physical space, it symbolizes the fusion of state power and patriarchal control. Firdos's forced marriage to the old man dramatizes the novel's central theme. Women are punished not for crimes, but for seeking freedom, dignity, and love. The aftermath underscores the resilience of resistance. Though her body is subdued, Firdos's spirit remains unbroken, her defiance echoing even in captivity. In short, The aftermath of Furtus's transfer is Osmond's smug triumph, Furtus's humiliation and trauma, and the community's grief and silence. Yet beneath it all, her unyielding spirit continues to resist, turning the House of Obedience into a stage for defiance rather than submission. Here's a comparison of the two incidents of the kidnap of Mona by the gang and transfer of Furtus by the police. 1. Kidnap of Mona by the Gang of Al-Wash. Nature of the act: Mona was kidnapped by a criminal gang led by Al-Wash. The gang deceived its members by claiming Mona was a runaway bride, legitimizing the crime under false pretenses. Violence and abuse. After abduction, Mona was taken to a brothel and brutally gang-raped by 6 men, including Omar the magician. The act was described as unimaginable cruelty, leaving her physically and emotionally shattered. Systemic corruption. Police corruption compounded her suffering. Although some gang members were arrested, Al-Wash escaped, and Omar was released after a bribe paid to Inspector Hussein by the wealthy man Osman Al-Taib. The Sharia court dismissed Mona's plight, framing her as a careless schoolgirl rather than a victim. Social context. This crime was clearly illegal, but occurred in a society where patriarchal norms and corruption allowed impunity for powerful men. 2. Arrest of Furtus by 5 policemen. Nature of the act: her arrest was not framed as a crime, but as enforcement of a Sharia court's verdict of obedience. 5 policemen stormed her home in Gadaref City, seized her by force, and transported her to her husband in a hotel in Khartoum City. Brutality during arrest: she was silenced, slapped, and humiliated during the transfer. At Osman's House of Obedience, she was chained, starved, beaten, and raped repeatedly, violence legitimized under Islamic Sharia law. Legal and cultural justification. Unlike Mona's case, Furtus's ordeal was sanctioned by the court, portraying her resistance as disobedience. This reflects systemic gender discrimination where state power colludes with patriarchal authority. Symbolism. The journey across Sudan, ending in Khartoum, symbolizes freedom slipping away. Her treatment underscores how women's autonomy is criminalized under the guise of morality and religious law. Key contrasts. Legality. Mona's kidnapping was a criminal act disguised as a personal vendetta, while Furtus's arrest was legalized oppression under Sharia law. Agents of violence. Mona suffered at the hands of gangsters. Furtus was brutalized by state agents, police, acting under judicial orders. Social commentary. Mona's case exposes corruption and moral decay in the criminal underworld. Furtus's ordeal critiques institutionalized misogyny and religious authoritarianism. Outcome: both girls endured rape and torture, but Furtus's suffering was prolonged and systemic, whereas Mona's was episodic yet devastating. Compare the brutality of Al-Wash on Mona with the torture of Osman Al-Taib on Furtus. Here's a comparative analysis based on the text. Brutality of Al-Wash on Mona. Nature of violence: Mona was kidnapped and taken to a brothel where she was brutally gang-raped by 6 men, including Al-Wash. The act is described as unimaginable cruelty, leaving her physically and emotionally shattered. Duration: her ordeal lasted 1 day, but the violence was intense and degrading. Systemic failure: corrupt police and Sharia court judges dismissed her plight, framing her as a careless schoolgirl rather than a victim, which compounded her suffering. Symbolism: Mona's experience exposes the predatory nature of patriarchal networks and the complicity of legal systems in silencing victims. Torture of Osman Al-Taib on Furtus. Nature of violence: Furtus endured prolonged and multifaceted abuse. She was beaten, starved, chained, imprisoned, and raped repeatedly. The text states Furtus was tortured much more brutally than Mona. Duration: her suffering spanned several days, culminating in her repeated rape and torture. Institutional enforcement: her torture was legitimized by the Sharia court's verdict of obedience, enforced by police who dragged her from her home and delivered her to Osman's House of Obedience. This dramatizes the collusion between state power and patriarchal authority. Symbolism: Furtus's ordeal represents systemic dehumanization. She was treated as property, and her resistance criminalized. Her rape and torture underscore the lethal consequences of institutionalized misogyny. Key differences. Aspect.
Mona Alwais.
Firtus, Osman al-Taib. Type of abuse. Gang rape by 6 men. Beating, starvation, chaining, rape. Duration. 1 day. Several days. Systemic role. Corrupt courts ignored her plight. Courts and police actively enforced abuse. Outcome. Survived, traumatized. Died after prolonged torture. Interpretation. While Mona's suffering was horrific, Furtus's ordeal was more extensive and institutionally sanctioned, making it a chilling example of how patriarchal law weaponizes obedience to justify violence.